In last part, we saw Chu Xiao rushed herself and her people to save Huan Huan. When two armies intersected, from afar Chu Xiao instantly recognized the crimson wire horse that belonged to Huan Huan, and Chu Xiao rushed over there on her horse. Seeing Huan Huan, she was stunned. There was an arrow embedded deeply in her chest, clearly having already pierced her lung, along the multiple wounds on her body. With weak breath, she was being carried by a female general who seemed to be in her 30s. What happened? Asking that, Chu Xiao jumped off her horse and knelt in the mud. Master Chu. Upon seeing her, the female general started crying and explained, His Majesty wants to kill our princess. General Xiaohe was killed in the combat, and our princess was also ambushed. Princess, princess, the female general held Huan Huan in her arms and cried alone. Chu Xiao comforted her. Huan Huan, hang in there. The doctor will save you. Huan Huan grabbed Chu Xiao's hand with all her strength, and suddenly she lowered her hand and bit into Chu Xiao's hand. Blood instantly started to follow from Chu Xiao's hand. Huan Huan thought that Chu Xiao's people killed them, but that was not true. Why? Why? Huan Huan desperately shouted at Chu Xiao, her mouth still full of blood and her eyes bloodshot. Why must you kill us? Why must you kill us? Huan Huan's voice finally vanished. Lying on the chilly ground, her red skirt seemed like a blooming flower. She was so young, merely 20, and her eyes seemed ever so clear. Her skin seemed ever so white, yet she had fallen asleep forever on the land that she had given her life to. Chu Xiao's heart had completely crumbled. Wave after wave of shock had torn her apart. Biting her lips, she stood there and quietly gazed upon Huan Huan's body. It was as though she had just been thrown into an endless abyss. She was thinking, Yanshun, what on earth have you done? At that time, He Xiao told her he had arrived. It was Yanshun. He Xiao was already unwilling to refer to him as His Majesty. Chu Xiao slowly turned around, only to see how the army split apart like the sea before Moses. The sunlight of dawn shone on the grandiose army that seemed like a black ocean. The young emperor was surrounded by the army, and with a black robe that was lined with golden dragons. His jet black hair was tied up. With an exceedingly cold gaze, he squinted his eyes and quietly looked over. It had been 2 years, and she had met him again. Yet Chu Xiao felt as though she had never met him before. This man before her seemed so unfamiliar. His appearance, his identity, his behavior, his aura, none of which were familiar to her. At that very moment, she suddenly understood that this man before her was the emperor of Yanbei, and no longer the youth that had nothing depending on her in Zhenhuang city. Ah Chu, a deep voice resounded in the quiet plains, accompanied by the fragile winds, entered Chu Xiao's ears. Looking at her from afar, one could no longer tell the emotions that Yanshun had within his eyes. The 2 years had passed between the two of them, and ultimately they met in such a circumstance. Yanshon's heart seemed like a vast barren plain with wind blowing. Looking at Chu Xiao, he seemed as though he wanted to say something, but ultimately he shallowed his words. With the aura of an emperor, he asked, "Are you going to be my enemy because of the unrelated people?" Thinking several moments about Mr. Wu, Lady Yu, and Huan Huan, Chu Xiao replied, "Yanshon, it took me 10 years to finally see the true you, as well as my true feelings. The previous memories are nothing more than memories, and I no longer have any sense of longing for you. There is only an unending sense of sadness and regret." "Ah Chu, have you forgotten of your previous promises?" The cold voice of Yanshun sounded up in her ear. Chu Xiao coldly smirked as she lifted an eyebrow in disdain and casually replied, "Since you already abandoned our dreams, why should I continue to abide by our promise?" Those words stabbed into Yanshon's heart like a barbed arrow, inducing much pain. "Yanshon, from today onwards, we will part ways and will no longer have any relationship. Regardless of what happens to you, whether you succeed in your battles and become an emperor or get defeated and thrown out of power, there will not be a single strand of our relationship with me, and at the same time, my matters will not require your approval." At that moment, Yanshun suddenly realized perhaps he would forever lose her. The very thought of that made him panic, yet he had on to his composure, and with a deep voice he questioned, "Ah Chu, how could you forget about our past relationship?" "Yanshun, do not ever mention the word relationship again." With much indifference, Chu Xiao stared at him and calmly continued, "You do not deserve to speak about it. Yan Bei, you are ultimately not destined to be my home. I had fought for you the most I could, but I merely saved you from a disaster by bringing another disaster." She closed her eyes and held her last drops of tears. By the time she reopened her eyes, her vision had already been elucidated. Under the vast sky where eagles soared, a decade had passed by so quickly. In this time, who was the one struggling, and who was the one who merely looked on? Yanshun, farewell. Thank you for staying with me. Please subscribe the channel and like the video to support me. Thank you.